Hello, and welcome to None of the Above. My name is Steve Nemirovsky, and I'm your host. None of the Above is a political program where we look at the causes of dysfunction and polarization in our political system. And in every show, in addition to looking at causes, we try and offer up solutions. And in offering up solutions, we try and suggest ways where you, the viewers, can get involved in government. And to the extent that you're concerned about the dysfunction and the polarization, find ways to get involved, find ways to get active, find ways to work on solutions. In a few of our shows, we've talked about the fact that Americans don't vote at a particularly high level, and we've alluded periodically to the fact that the midterm elections, the elections between presidential elections, that there's a greater drop-off and a significantly lower percentage of voting. I had never taken the trouble to try and pin this down before, but for those of you that have seen some of our last few shows, we're spending some time on demographics, and I've been looking at some of the demographics at Pew Research, and I ran across a study that they had concluded on the midterms and shows the drop-off in voting. So I thought we'd at least take a look at some of these statistics and give you an idea of what happens in midterms. And in fact, we're in a midterm election year this year. 2014 is a midterm. There'll be no presidential candidate on the ballot. Some states may not even have a U.S. senator on the ballot or even governor on the ballot. So there's always a drop-off, and sometimes that's the reason why these high-profile offices are not on the ballot, and people who are already a bit apathetic and not voting find it even less important to vote in the midterms. So let's take a look at the Pew Research and just give you a little hint of what goes on in midterms. So again, this is midterm elections, and we're talking about the voter drop-off. And what we have here in black is on the side, this is the percentage of people that are voting, percentage of people voting. And at the bottom is roughly the years we're talking about. And this particular study ranges from 1948 up until 2012, the last presidential election. Again, this is coming to us from the Pew Research Center. And I also want to point out that when we look at the statistics on the whiteboard today, these are not going to match what you normally think of as the voting turnout statistics. And that's because when Pew does their analysis, they base, as far as I understand it, they base their percentages on the total population, not just the eligible voting population. So in other words, the total population of the country that would include some immigrants who can't vote, some prisoners who can't vote. So the Pew statistics are slightly skewed, but I think in a relative sense, this paints the exact picture we're looking at. So in green here, we have the presidential elections, and then in blue, we have the midterm elections. And you can see running from 1948 up until 2012, the range for presidential elections has been pretty much between 51% and 60%. I think we barely made it across 60% a couple times here. And then you'll note in the midterm elections, the drop-off going back to 1948 was 41%. So in 1948, or roughly then, I don't know when the presidential election was. I don't know when the nearest midterm was. 51% roughly are voting in the presidential election, 41% in the midterm. So you had a drop-off of about 10%. Fast forward to 2012, you had roughly 54% voting in the presidential election, and in the closest midterm, you only had 37% voting. So you can see this is a significant drop-off. There's a couple reasons that are offered. Again, as I said, we have an apathetic public to begin with. We don't have the high-profile presidential race. Most people, I think, attribute the midterm effect to the fact that the president has been in office for 2 years, maybe done some things the public hasn't liked, and the people coming to the polls are just the people who are coming to reflect their dissatisfaction with the president, not necessarily the people coming to the polls to express their satisfaction with the president. Similarly, there's a notion that in some of our trifecta states, remember we're talking about trifecta states, the people that may be who are not coming to the polls are satisfied with the trifecta, and they know that the trifecta is going to be there and it's working for them. So the only people coming again are maybe to express dissatisfaction, people coming to vote to avoid a trifecta situation. So it is not exactly clear why we have the drop-off, but I think you can see from this data we clearly do have the drop-off, anywhere maybe from a 10% drop-off to, I think in some of these years, closer to 15, 16, 70% drop-off. And that drop-off makes has a very dramatic impact on the outcome of elections, and as we've seen, particularly the outcome on some of these ballot measures and in other initiatives that are very important issues that just don't get the attention of the electorate. As we've noted, and I'm going to just point out here again, if only 37% of the people vote, if only 41% of the people vote, and on that particular issue all you need is a majority, that means on any issue from this year, just a little over 21% of the people are deciding that issue for the entire population. In this particular year, when you had 31% of the people voting, just a little over 18.5% of the people are deciding an issue for the entire group of people voting. So when you only have 20% of the people deciding and you only have 18% of the people deciding, you get dysfunction, you get polarization, you get skewed results.